Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Well, I'm assuming Catherine Ramsland, the world-respected expert in criminology and also a true crime author, tweeted this story: when a criminology student turns criminal. And that was tweeted from the Inside Higher Education website, Inside Higher Ed website. Not, I don't think she tweeted it because she disagrees with it, right? But because she supports the contentions in the article, right? I mean, isn't that why most of us tweet things? Because we feel we agree with something. And the blurb refers to the following: the man accused of murdering 4 University of Idaho students was pursuing a PhD in criminology. Academics in his field say it's a mistake to connect his scholarship to the brutal crime. Is it? Do you agree with that? And so one has to wonder, if you had to ask Catherine Ramsland, if you had to say, Catherine, do you think there's a link between his studies in criminology and the crime? What do you think her answer would be? Do you think it would be yes or no? And whatever her answer, do you think you would agree with that? And how does that then reflect on someone's acumen, someone's knowledge in terms of this practical case? Someone's knowledge of chronology and the links that sort of exist between a criminal and their background and their backstory. What do you think that says about someone who say, I don't really see a link there? Do you agree with them? And so, in my opinion, it is unavoidable that one starts to look at this case and also starts to look at the entire field of criminology and ask, how effective is it? How well are the professors teaching kids to study crime and to be effective as criminal investigators? How good is the critical thinking in terms of the syllabus? And then at its root, in terms of this case, are they able to look at themselves in the mirror and analyze themselves? Are they able to look, I'm talking about the professors, Kohberger's professors, are they able to look in the mirror and turn that sort of sharp precision, what do you call it, the intelligence applied to themselves and their situation?
You see a lot, Doctor. But are you strong enough to point that high-powered perception at yourself? What about it? Why don't you look at yourself and write down what you see? Maybe you're afraid to.
Before we get to the rest of this episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Bear in mind, I'll be doing an analysis on the Rust incident, Alec Baldwin. We're going to look at the legal story. Some people think it's just absolutely absurd that it was all accidental. How on earth can you turn something legal out of this? It's an accident. So how on earth, why are they going after Alec Baldwin? But when you have a pattern of accidents, then you have a situation that isn't an accident that's waiting to happen, not accidental. What happens in a situation like that? So we'll be talking about that, dealing with that, also dealing with the campaign that Baldwin has been on, trying to influence public perception, all the Instagrams, all of his commentary. Has that succeeded? And then equally, do you think the case against him in a courtroom scenario, do you think they have a chance in getting a conviction? Do you think it's even going to go to trial? So we'll be dealing with that live this evening at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time or midnight Eastern, so look out for that. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So as far as I know, and I'll put a link to this article from Inside Higher Ed in the description, but as far as I know, when I look at it, when I read it, it's quite biased. It's certainly providing one particular view, that there's no connection to the crime, right? And there's not anyone giving an alternative view to that, an alternative opinion. It is simply pushing one particular viewpoint, that there is no connection, right? That is how I understand it. So read it yourself and see if you come away with the same feeling, right? And so doesn't it mean that what we're dealing with here is we shouldn't connect the fact that he was studying criminology to the fact, well, allegedly, that he also committed a crime? So his interest in the criminal mind was purely academic. Purely academic. Quoting from the article, it's tempting to draw a connection between Kohberger's academic pursuits and the crime he's accused of committing, but experts say that neither the evidence in the case nor the nature of criminology scholarship supports that link. End quote. Okay, so this isn't someone who was trying to prove how smart he was. This isn't someone who was potentially using his knowledge of criminology to outsmart law enforcement. There's just, no connection whatsoever. It's just random. It just, out of nowhere, just came up with something. Going back to the website, quote, studying criminology is not going to make you a criminal, and it's not going to make you a better criminal. And that's according to James Allen Fox, a professor of criminology at the Northeastern University and the former dean of its College of Criminal Justice. What we teach is how come, not how, end quote. No. That's not the issue here. That's also not the question. We're not asking if you study criminology, you'll become a criminal. We're suggesting because he studied criminology, it may have a material impact on how he may have gone about thinking, planning, and executing his crime. It seems very much like, it surely not me. Surely, a sort of a very exceptional attitude of why on earth would you cast a finger of blame to any of us? It's not blame, though. It is simply looking for a connection. But I do think overall it's got to feel embarrassing for someone to come out of essentially the field of pursuing criminals, catching criminals, right? Someone that then literally appears to have committed a crime. That's certainly not a compliment to that particular faculty. I mean, could there be a difference on how a PhD in criminology executes a particular crime to, say, a young up-and-coming kindergarten teacher who specializes in reading Little Red Riding Hood, or, say, a deer hunter from Alaska? There's also another expert, Mary Ellen O'Toole, a former FBI profiler and the director of George Mason University's Forensic Science Program. She says that while some psychopaths who commit mass murder harbor a fascination with criminals, she does not believe one necessarily leads to the other. End quote. Again, it's not the question whether fascination with criminals generally leads to copycat crimes. That's not the question here. It's whether it led to that in this case. So I do have to beg to differ with the expert former FBI profiler in this instance, in that in all the profiling I did on mass shooters, and unfortunately there's just been a major incident in California, but virtually all of them were in fact inspired by the actions of other mass shooters. And the article goes to a lot of effort to try and separate and say, there's also no link between mass shooters and serial killers or something like that. There is kind of a similar fabric going on. There's a similar level of sadism, a similar level of advanced and extreme criminality. So when I investigated that topic, I spent a lot of time studying up, reading about what they did, and it turns out they in turn did a lot of research on other mass shooters, what they did, how they did it, which weapons they used, how they marketed their campaigns, what they said, the kind of selfies that they took. They copied one another as well. And this is not just one instance. This is multiple instances of these mass shooters inspiring one another. So in my experience, more often than not, mass shooters are very much inspired and influenced by other criminals. So what I'm seeing here seems to be an attempt to parlay one's criminology expertise as completely harmless, simply because one happens to also teach in the criminology field. I mean, isn't this basically a case of professional hand-wringing? I mean, it's addressing this issue defensively, reflexively, instead of actually applying one's mind in terms of your knowledge of criminology, well, to your own area.
You see a lot, Doctor. But are you strong enough to point that high-powered perception at yourself?
Going back to the article, quote, while at DeSales, Kohberger also studied under Catherine Ramsland. So this is a reference to Catherine Ramsland in the article, and it's obviously perhaps this reference that caught her eye and also led to her retweeting it, right, or tweeting it. And anyway, the article goes on to say, who's an expert on serial killers who helped Dennis Rader, also known as the BTK killer, who strangled 10 people to death in Kansas in the mid-70s. She helped him write his autobiography. Ramsland also told Inside Higher Ed via email, so she actually contributed to the article, that she was making no media statements at this time. Okay, so maybe she wasn't contributing to the article, but certainly she would have been aware of the article. Anyway, then Fox pushed back, this other professor pushed back on those trying to connect Ramsland's scholarship with Kohberger's alleged killings, right? And this is what he said. The media started playing on the fact that one of his professors had written a book about BTK, who was a serial killer, not a mass killer. These crimes are very different. So they're trying to disassociate all of that from Kohberger. And Fox is also the author of Killer on Campus and Extreme Killing. And then he said, I don't think there's any significance to that. Whereas O'Toole said, revelations from the release of an affidavit last Wednesday indicated that even if Kohberger considered himself a student of crime as practice, he wasn't a very good one. So that seems to be minimizing the whole thing. Even if he was that, he wasn't a really good one. That is not the point. The point is, was he using criminology as a sort of jumping off point? If he was fixated, if he's a obsessive compulsive person and very emasculated, very humiliated, could he have gone into the area of expertise for inspiration in a particular area? That's the question. And I don't think it's an unnatural, strange, sort of revolutionary question to ask. I think it's a natural question to ask. O'Toole went on to say, people are giving the suspect too much credit for his academic excellence. And then she added, looking at the affidavit, there were a tremendous number of elementary mistakes made from a forensic and technological perspective that led to his arrest, end quote. Again, although it's true that he has been given too much credit for being so smart in inverted commas, these experts aren't giving his background enough credit, along with the praise that his professors gave him for being so smart. One could argue the best thing he had going for him were the endorsements from his lecturers. So I'm not going to take it further than that, but what I want to ask you guys, and please address this in your comments, is what do you think of the response from the folk in the criminology area, right? Some of the people quoted in this article. What do you think about their assessment of Kohberger and any connection or lack of, which is their argument? What do you think of that as a reflection of their expertise? These are people who are the leading minds, the best experts, the go-to experts that the mainstream media go to when they need a soundbite. What do you think of their assessment regarding Kohberger now that it's sort of coming out of sort of their area, the whole criminology thing? What do you think about their assessment? Do you agree with it, or do you think that their expertise may not be quite as impressive as perhaps you originally thought? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.